Hello everyone and welcome to this FintechOS tutorial, a very special tutorial because as you can see, the season is upon us, and what better way to celebrate than by learning how to extend FintechOS entities in order to be able to build some complex digital journeys that will use attributes from a multitude of entities. So let's see how it's done. So as an example, if we look at a specific FintechOS digital journey, we can see that it uses plenty of input fields, right? That are ranging from personal details fields to financial details to details specific for the journey, which means that in order to generate these input fields, the journey needs to use attributes from a multitude of entities, which are basically extended from the main entity of the digital journey. So let's jump into the studio and let me show you how you can do this as well. So this is one of the flows of this digital journey, and this is how it looks like on the flow map inside the FintechOS Studio. And as you can see, we're dealing with a lot of steps here, right? This is a complex flow, and for a flow that has this many steps, it is obvious that you're going to use more than one entity. And to understand what I mean by that, if we go to data model, we're going to see that as any other form-driven flow, this particular one has a certain entity that it is based on. However, if we take a look below this, we can see that we have three more entities here, and these three entities are also used inside this flow. This is a part of the entity extensions capability inside FintechOS. Essentially, if you want to build a complex flow, you have to choose one main entity and then extend that entity, right? And if we go over to insert existing, we can see all of the entity extensions that were set up starting from this main entity that this flow is based on. Now, depending on the specifics of your own flow, you probably will not see any entities in this area at all, or probably you see and you want to add more extensions and you wonder how can you do that? Well, you go over on the sidebar, go to Evolutive Data Model Explorer. And basically you search for the entity that you want to extend. And then you access the entity, and in here you scroll down until you come across the extend model section. And essentially this is the capability that allows you to extend a certain entity. And essentially you do this in order to build complex flows inside digital journeys. Okay, now these are all the extensions that we have for this particular entity. But to understand this better, let's extend this with new entities. So if we click on insert, then this window will open up. And first of all, we have to give it a name. Now it has to be something specific so that you know what this is about. Okay, so I'm going to give it something specific for my case so that I know what this is in reference to, and then we come across the most important option in this capability, the extension type. If we click on this drop down, we're going to see that we have 4 extension types. And first of all, we have the custom extension type. Now, this will allow you to create virtual attributes that you can use inside your flows, but these attributes will not be physically stored inside your data model, right? It is custom, it is independent from your data model. So if we choose this and we click on save and reload, we can see that the virtual attributes tab is now generated, and here we can add these virtual attributes. Basically, attributes, as you know, inside a form-driven flow are translated into actual fields, right? Input fields that the user can interact with. And if we click on insert here, we can basically create a new attribute that isn't stored in any entity, okay? And we can first of all choose the attribute type, just like in the case of a normal attribute, right? The text, the map, the HTML, the bool, any other attribute type that you want to use. And if I select text, then I can give some more details. I can choose the length, for this attribute that will be transformed into a field, and I can give it a name. And it can be anything you want, right? Employer status or whatever you see fit, right? And then you can choose this as a display name, or you can customize the display name to whatever you want it to look like on the user interface. Okay, the required level, again, whatever you see fit, a tooltip in order for the user to know what this is about, or for the agents that interact with the flow that you want to create. And essentially we can save and close this one. This is how the custom extension type works. And then as you can see, this is the custom extension that I have created, and it can be used inside a flow. I'm going to show you later on in this video how you can find it in the flow that is based on this entity. Okay, now let's insert a new extension. And in this case, I'll give it a slightly different name. And I called it related because I'm going to choose the second extension type, which is called related. And essentially this type of extension allows you to create such an extension from the current entity to another entity from your data model that is related to the current entity through a lookup attribute. So in this case, the current entity that we are basing the extension on is the child entity in the relationship. Okay, so the relation attribute, we have to choose it from here. Basically, as you can see, these are all lookup attributes because they have the ID letters at the end, right? So basically, if we choose the attribute, we choose the relation. Okay, so let's basically choose this one, and you can also select the isOwner for relation option, so that when an entity instance is created, an entity connected through the relation attribute field will also be created to fulfill this logic. And then if we save and reload, we can see that the virtual attributes tab is generated once again. And if we click on insert this time, the interface is slightly different because this time you are not only created virtual attributes that are independent from the data model. Instead, if we click on this drop down here, related attributes, we essentially choose an attribute from the related entity. So in this case, the parent entity that we have based this extension on. So these are all attributes that are not in our current entity, but on the related entity. And we want to create virtual attributes from them so that we can use them inside our flow. Okay, so for example, this one right here, cover time family, it is automatically changed to the attribute type that it is actually as original in the parent entity. Okay, so you don't have to make any other changes, only the required level, the use related display name, or the tooltip if you want to change this. Okay, so if we save and close, then a virtual attribute that is identical to the attribute from the parent entity has been created. And now this was done in order to be able to use this attribute inside our flow. It has to be a virtual attribute, and you can create as many virtual attributes you want from the related entity. And then of course, you can create as many extensions you want to any of the related entities from the current entity. So we can see our new extension right here. We can see that is related, and we can see the relation attribute right here. Basically the attribute that testifies that there is a relation between our current entity and the parent entity that we have chosen. Then let's add another extension. And this time, let's choose the one-to-one extension type. Now, this is very similar to the relation extension type, but remember that in the relation extension type, the current entity that we're working on was the child entity in a relationship with another entity, right? In this case, in the one-to-one relationship, it is the other way around, right? The current entity, the quote that we are working on, is the parent entity. And from this particular drop down here, we can choose between all of the entities that are related to our current entities, only that this time these are the child entities, right? You can see the lookup attribute here. This is basically the foreign key of these entities, right? It says quote, and remember that the foreign key is placed in the child entity. So we can choose one of these relationships and click OK. And then we can give it a name. Let's say basically extension 1-to-1, so that I know what this is about. Is owner for relation, again, just like before. If it is the case in your situation, we can save and reload. And then again, click on virtual attributes. And then again, you can choose a related attribute from the other entity, right? Which in this case is the child entity. Before, in the related extension type was the same principle. You can choose an attribute from the other entity, but in this case, the relationship is basically changed. Okay, so we can choose an entity in this case. Let's choose this one. And again, all of the other fields are automatically completed based on the original details. So the attribute type, the name, the display name, everything else. If you want to fill out the tooltip and the required level, you can do that. Okay, for now, let's save and close. And again, we can see it here. We can see the extension type and the relation attribute, which is placed in the child entity. Now let's add one last extension. And in this case, this is going to be a transient data entity. Transient data entities are very interesting. They're not actually entities that are stored inside FintechOS. They're just surfaced through an external API inside the FintechOS Evolutive Data Core, okay? And in our case, the only transient data entity is the external health data. However, you can set this up right inside the Evolutive Data Core and have more transient data entities. Now, it is very important that when you set this up, you need to have automation scripts that are set up in order to be able to proceed with the full configuration of this extension. And now once we have set up our extensions along with the virtual attributes that we want to use inside this flow for this entity, we can add them in here. So we can click on insert existing, and here we have our entities that we have just set up. So let's choose the related entity, and just like that, it has been added inside this table. And now if we want to use it inside this flow, this is how we're going to do this. We've just created a new step inside this flow, and if we click on UI Designer, go to Data Templates, and let's say that we want to add a simple one attribute column responsive layout. We click on this layout here, and then we search in this big list of attributes, right? And in this case, this one right here is the attribute that we have just added as a virtual attribute inside the related extension type. Okay, and remember that this was, I think, a text attribute type, and we've just added it in there, and now it will be displayed on the front-end interface for the user that will go through our flow. And that's about it for this video. Now, I really hope you enjoyed it and that you found it useful. Now, don't forget to check out the FintechOS Academy as well, where you'll find free courses. Whether you're a digital consultant or a digital engineer, there will be a free course waiting for you inside the FintechOS Academy. So go ahead and check it out. I mean, it's free. There's nothing to lose. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Hit that notification button to be up to date with every single one of our videos. With that being said, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.